You had to be a madman to be paying attention to NFTs on alt chains over the last 18 months. But like, that's no longer true. You would have to be a madman not to be doing that right now. We talk about what are some strong narratives. You got to take a step back, right? What are the like meta strong narratives in crypto? I think this cycle, it feels the strongest is alt L1, right? You see Solana. And I think the indicative thing there is not just Solana running, but Sei running. My understanding is L1s have a bigger barrier to entry in terms of technological development than a lot of other things. And so when there is a run in crypto, it's hard to say, oh, shoot, let me just spin up an L1, right? This is a higher barrier to entry. And it's just a strong narrative because it's conclusive that we're going to have a spot ETF ETH narrative. We're probably going to have a spot ETF Solana narrative. And then what, right? Like, that's just like the clear thing that's probably going to happen. Okay, then you have what's the next strong narrative is ETH beta, right? As ETH goes up, what is the like proxy ETH exposure? You have clearly, you know, all the L2's, you got Optimism, you got Arbitrum, you've got Polygon. Like, there's a bunch of these L2's that are out there. In terms of what Pac-Man and team are looking to pull off, like Blast is interesting, makes sense. I think they're just going to do it, right? Like, if with Blur at 2 billion, you have $1.5 billion bridged, and you know, who knows, right? But like, it wouldn't shock me, you know, that's a comparable amount of ETH. It looks like their play is that they're trying to launch an L2 that has a native NFT ecosystem, which none of the other L2s really have accomplished. That's one of the reasons, actually, I think that Solana and Sei both are having stronger narratives than the L2s, is they've been able to bring in an ecosystem of NFTs. Now, why does that matter? Because a lot of people have realized in the last cycle, one of the biggest drivers of ETH gas fee payment, when gas fee payment is the business a lot of these L1s and L2s are in, is collecting gas fees, right? And so like, if your business is generating gas fees, well, guess what? NFTs and NFT fi create a lot of gas fees. They create a lot of transaction volume. They bring in a lot of users, right? It's a great thing. And who's going to most be able to capture that narrative? Well, gee, maybe it's the group that made the largest NFT trading marketplace, right? Talk to a lot of the bigger players in the space, and like, everyone's like, yeah. Look, FDV of Blast, I would guess, is somewhere like 5 to 20 billion. Then I know that's a large range, but like, it really has a very high potential upside because it's the strongest L2 going into this next cycle that's shiny and new. And I think you see this where like ETH runs and Blur price runs like 40% at the same time. Like, actually, I recently added to my Blur position, like staked Blur position, because when ETH ran, you saw the other L2s run first, and it was like, huh? Clearly, like, Blur is, of all the L2s, I think one of the better ETH betas, right? Is like, if you believe ETH has the strongest narrative going into this, which I think is a reasonable take given what we saw happen in the Bitcoin ETF. We have an ETH ETF narrative, it's going to happen. Like, it just makes so much sense. But like, what they're attempting to do is super interesting, and it's relatively easy to get exposure to, right? Like, if you're just sitting in ETH, NFA, DYOR, like, there's risk of the bridge, and there's a bunch of risks here. Assuming that nothing bad happens with the bridge, bridging ETH to Blast is just better than holding ETH, right? And that's like a crazy, it just has to be, right? So I think the incentive structure for people to build on it being so explicit, being so large, like they announced their competition yesterday, I mean, that's a big incentive. I think we will see a lot, and I've already talked to a bunch of teams, we will see a lot of very serious teams build on Blast. Additionally, because like, not only NFT fi protocols, but like, we're going to see like NFTs on Blast. Why? Because think about all the liquidity there. You have the chain with the best NFT fi is clearly going to have NFTs, right? It's just kind of that simple. And I think as it stands today, when we have other things coming up, right? The most, I think, direct competitor Blast is probably Frame. We see some other pushes happening, but say what you will about Blur, say what you will about Pac-Man. In my heart of hearts, it's just going to print for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think it's clear now that it's a tough case to make to say that Blur killed the NFT market and all that. Just look at what's happening right now. Beyond this, Spencer, you talked about new narratives being favored in crypto. Sei has only been out for 4 months.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at Sei. It's something that I've looked at in the past as well. I think the bull cases is that like Sei is kind of what Sol was last time, where like there's just this face melting run on NFTs. One of the interesting things about Sei is that all of the top projects are made by the same team in the NFT space, and so that's a little interesting. I'm looking for maturity.
Listen, that may be true, but that's besides the point, okay? Say what you will. I'm confident Sei's gonna cook here. I think it goes to like $1.50 right now. Yesterday, the market sold off somewhat strongish, I would say, a couple percentage points across a few majors, and Sei was pushing back to all-time high. The Cosmos ecosystem in general is just really interesting. I do have some concerns about consistent new users, because that's like the big thing for me here, and I want to see that number continue to ramp, but you can't really fade these new chains at the start of a bull. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing for me. Is like this, Celestia, Atom, it just seems seems like the narrative's really shifting towards Cosmos. And that's also why I'm like now even going one layer further into Blast and looking at this hackathon that they're doing and following every project that's applying for every single one. Because that's where I'm like, there's going to be some sleeper opportunities in those first mover advantage apps that do tokens or NFTs or more on Blast, much like we've seen from these new chains. I'm not going to sleep on that. I'm going to start diving in and look at like the first NFT on Blast, the first perp index on Blast, the first tools on Blast for trading. Like all of those things are just copying narratives from other chains that have worked successfully. And if it's not broke, you don't fix it. You know what I mean?
Anything to add, Spencer?
Easy hit the nail on the head, right? This is one of those things like don't right curve this, left curve this. Look at Blast, look at Say, obviously. It's just that simple,
It's like the
right?
biggest no-brainer in the world.
Yeah,
If you don't
I
want to
mean-
dive into Blast, just I guess pick up some Blur if like you don't have time, because that's like the pseudo parent bet on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's,
and like, this
ways
is
to
the thing, too.
navigate this for each bankroll and position of time and stuff like that.